Okay, let's see if I can formulate my questions. I wanted to ask a little bit about the other perspective, so to speak. The story, if like I as a character, if I feel like someone else has treated me badly in some way and maybe they feel ashamed about that. I mean, all that is a story, but what I wanted to ask about is like, is there a place for boundaries and standards, or like, can you forgive too quickly, or
Yeah.
that's the question.
Yeah. So can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So that's a really good question, but it's kind of like I'm not trying to bypass this question myself. So just in case you didn't hear, what she was asking is like can it kind of be like with this message that you kind of let people abuse you, because your boundaries are too soft, so you kind of hear it and then you kind of like you're focused in the present moment, I assume, and then you're kind of like people are being abusive to you, or you're being abusive to yourself, or you're not really recognizing what's happened. Is that kind of the question, Andrea?
Yeah, or it's like my natural tendency to just forgive everything right away, but if that can be taken too far, or like if you should have I don't know, like just around boundaries and this dynamic, yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I think it's something that people struggle with all the time. And yeah, so non-duality is kind of different from therapy. So what I kind of feel like the question is about is the karma and the dynamics of the person. And that's something that needs to be learned through therapy, not through necessarily having therapy, but from reading about it and understanding what boundaries are and what your relationship is to boundaries. And then when you do that, then there can be a relearning, and then there'll be a better, more healthy relationship to boundaries. But I see that as not the same thing as non-duality. And this is where non-duality and these types of things really cross over, because so you can be listening to somebody that's, say, being abusive to you, and then you can become really present and you can ignore the thoughts that are saying leave the room or do something or don't let them speak to you like that, or who do they think they are, because you're focusing on the present moment. And that is where non-duality and boundaries can really conflict. And it's a lot better to work on boundaries with a trained therapist or with people that know about boundaries and learn how to have healthy boundaries, rather than using non-dual pointing to deal with the pain of it. You understand the difference, Andrea? I just ask you to unmute. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I do understand the difference, but I do find it a little bit hard to navigate because it's like it's on two different levels. So yeah.
That's why it's really good to work for someone for a period on boundaries. Boundaries are so incredibly tricky, and yeah, they're so incredibly tricky, and it's still something I trip over as well. And I have to read and remind myself about correct boundaries when, sorry, the meetings you're echoing. When yeah, when I'm interacting with people. Boundaries are very difficult to navigate. Yeah. So I would really recommend working with someone or watching lots of videos on it to keep reminding the self. And what you're doing, it's not really somebody that's being reminded, because who would be reminded? But you're retraining the body and the brain, just as if you're training your body to play the guitar. So you're retraining by keep watching and reading books on what appropriate boundaries are. So when someone speaks to you in a certain way, you can recognize that and you can be like, okay, that is inappropriate to speak to me like that. And then how to deal with it, whether you walk away, whether you interrupt and say something, or whether, yeah, because boundaries, if your parents didn't have good boundaries and didn't teach you how to do boundaries, then you're not going to have good boundaries as an adult. But that's not the same as presence. Presence and consciousness is that which is watching the person and is totally at free if you have good boundaries or not. So somebody that's moved back or awoken to the consciousness still might not have the best boundaries, but they might not have so much mental activity around it, or regret or guilt or blame. It's hard to see though, isn't it? How does that make you feel, Andrea? Sorry, I have to keep muting you because you're echoing. Yeah, it's still muted. I can ask to unmute you. There you go.
Yeah, I guess what I'm kind of wondering, because it, like, to me, it feels good to forgive someone, or it actually feels good to be okay with everything. Also, I mean, I don't know how much is, you know, like spiritual bypass, or, but the question is more like, is it okay to be okay with everything, you know, or like
your essence is okay with everything.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had to just mute you because you're sorry. So your essence is okay with everything. Consciousness is okay with everything. So Satchitananda. So you could be in samadhi, you could be in bliss in a war zone or in a jail. But this isn't the end of the story, because in samadhi, you cannot move, you cannot do anything, you're in bliss. You'd be machined down and you'd be like loving the bullets and loving the gun, and you'd be totally okay with it. So the way in which this life works and in which it's integrated is it's living through a human being which has boundaries. And it's not appropriate to let somebody abuse you, because that's not self-love on a human level. That's more than likely someone on the human level that's afraid of conflict. But that's a different thing, and that needs to be worked on the human level. Like, you need to work out how to deal with that. But you might not be talking about somebody abusing you. You might actually have really great relationships at the moment. So you are kind of at peace in everything. As long as you intellectually understand what good boundaries are and what good boundaries aren't, then you can totally be at peace also when somebody is treating you inappropriately, but your body will be responding with, no, that's not okay to do that. But there'll be a foot in peace, but you might even be fierce, like there might be anger coming out on the human level, or tears or crying. This is a really important subject, so if you have something else you'd like to comment about that. Sorry.
Yeah, I guess it's hard to know where to draw the line. I mean, my situation is not so severe, it's not like abusive, but it's still behavior that's not like lies and, you know, things that it's not really good behavior or whatever, whatever that is. But like, where do you draw the line?
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, that's something you have to really work in detail with somebody, or really learn about it, where the line is drawn. You can't find that with non-duality.
Yeah.
But what you can do is be in surrender to people's dynamics. So you're not suffering people's dynamics, because you're right, you're not going to be interacting with a healthy world that have all been through spirituality and therapy. So they might be acting out stuff. You can be totally at peace with it. And sometimes you have to surrender to stuff because there's not any other option. But also you can learn about the best ways to deal with it. There's so much information out there now about relationships and healthy relationships. Yeah, but peace is in everything. It really is. But that doesn't mean becoming a doormat. And it doesn't mean not having emotions, not that you don't get upset if somebody lies or cheats to you. That's what happens on the human level, like, yeah. But prior to that, there is absolute peace. And knowing that peace and having your hand in that peace brings a peace to everything, but it doesn't stop human reactions. It's appropriate to be angry if somebody deceives and cheats and steals. But your heart is totally at peace with it. Your heart completely understands it and accepts it and loves it, because that's what consciousness does to everything. It rejects nothing. And that profoundly affects the human and the human mentality and responses, so you don't suffer so much it. How does that sound, Andrea? Did we get more towards it?
No, that feels complete. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Andrea.